The election campaign gets dirty. The Labour leader accuses the PM of lies over his tax claims. The Conservatives double down. Good evening, welcome to Newsnight. Let me introduce you to our political panel. Tonight we have Phil Collins, who was Tony Blair's speechwriter and worked alongside Sir Keir Starmer on his 2021 conference speech, was it? 2021?
I think so.
Yeah. Good. And we also have Mercy Muroki, who is a former policy advisor to the Conservatives' Kemi Badenoch. Welcome to you as well. Now today, as you probably know, being a Newsnight viewer, has been very much about the fallout from last night's TV debate when Mr Sunak claimed households would be paying £2,000 more in tax if Labour win the election. We questioned Energy Secretary Claire Coutinho on Newsnight last night, straight after the ITV debate. Claire Coutinho, where did you get this £2,000 figure from? Because it's not an impartial, independent figure, is it? It's your own Tory special advisors who've added this up and come up with the sums.
No, not at all. So this is a figure which has come up by Treasury officials. So those are independent, impartial civil servants. And what they've done is very simple. They've added up the costs of the policies that the Labour Party have said that they want to put in place in the next Parliament. And the figure that comes out with is an extra £2,000 of taxes for working families. And the reason that I think Keir Starmer couldn't simply just say, no, I'm not doing that, for many times he was challenged on this question, is because it's true.
I mean, Victoria, you put rubbish in, you get rubbish out, and that's what this is.
That's independent civil servants in the Treasury.
I'm going to pull you up on that, Claire Coutinho. I'm going to pull you up on that. They're not independent, they're not impartial. The assumptions on which the calculations are based have been made by Tory special advisors, their political appointees, and you and no, hang on, and that is misleading to voters and therefore very disrespectful.
So can I just say, those numbers are created by the Treasury, and there's very strict rules on how you can do opposition costings. If you think that the Treasury would just add up anything that Tory special advisors gave them, no matter what it was, and come out with a figure which is backed by the Treasury, then you're sorely mistaken.
Okay. So, Nick is here, and the Conservatives have doubled down on this today, and Sir Keir Starmer has called the Prime Minister a liar, which is very unusual.
Yeah, Vic, I mean, excuse the pun, but you were on the money on this one, because that was an early glimpse of what has now become the biggest row of this election campaign so far, which is Rishi Sunak trying to recreate what served John Major so well in 1992, which is a Labour tax bombshell, saying that after what the Prime Minister said in that debate and after what his close cabinet colleague Claire Coutinho told you, which is that this sum of money was signed off by the Treasury. Now, we know the Treasury are absolutely not happy about that, because they wrote a letter to Labour 2 days about this, and they're saying, yes, we did make these assessments as opposition spending plans. All governments ask all Treasury officials to do that. There's nothing strange about that. But obviously the point is, you pointing out, these are assessments made by political advisors. But there's another element to this, which is that Tories came up with a global figure, £38 billion black hole in Labour's plans, which produced that £2,000 figure from the Prime Minister. That was based on some additional work by the Institute for Government. Nick Davis, who is the Institute for Government guy who did that, said his research is being used in a nonsense way. So what is the reaction? Labour absolutely delighted. They're saying we have caught the Tories absolutely red-handed. From the Conservatives, I was talking to a former Cabinet Minister who is often critical of Rishi Sunak, and they're saying very happy. Labour on the defensive. They're talking about process, what the Treasury thinks. They're not talking about substance. But Rishi Sunak was clearly waiting for this moment. He was well prepared.
What you saw last night was a Prime Minister with his back against the wall, desperately trying to defend 14 years of failure, resorting, and it was a flash of his character, an insight into his character, to lies. I don't say that lightly.
So, Phil Collins, you've worked with Keir Starmer, you've worked with Tony Blair, and Tony Blair coped with these Tory attacks in the run-up to 97. What's the difference between then and now?
Well, the difference is that Labour is still 20-odd points ahead. If you remember back to those attacks, New Labour, New Danger and all of that stuff, they didn't exactly work very well, did they? And I don't think these will work very well either. I think there is a desperation to this, and I understand why this Prime Minister is desperate, because he is desperate. And when you're desperate, you need desperate measures. And so he's done what every campaign has this moment, when you add up all the possible numbers you can ever find anywhere, you put them all together in one big box, you do 4 years at once, but you don't tell anyone it's 4 years at once, and you make it sound like a very big number, then you divide it by the number of households, and lo and behold, you say, this is the bill. Yeah. You pretend that's coming today. Now, so far, so conventional. The bit that they've got really badly wrong was to then really foolishly, and this is amateur hour in my view, to allow themselves to be hung on the fact that they're pretending the Treasury has sanctioned this move, when if only they'd said, look, we've done these costings and we are telling you, that would be a standard move. And that would then get you into an argument about tax. I have to say, a stupid argument about tax, because I think the Spectator tonight have done a piece in which they've said, well, the Conservative Party, if you did the same exercise with the Tory Party, it would be £3,000 per household.
That's right, yeah.
So the whole thing is preposterous, really, even at the level of their analysis. But they've managed to take something ridiculous and turn it into an own goal.
Right. Is it an own goal? Are the Conservatives happy that this figure of £2,000 is being discussed?
Well, clearly it had lots of traction, because when the snap poll was done following the debate last night, Rishi Sunak actually was a couple of points ahead. I think he was 51% of people in that snap poll thought he did better. So clearly the strategy he had at the time was something that did have traction. You know, the Prime Minister's not stupid. He knows that people could very well be focusing on the fact, the bigger Conservative figures in terms of the tax burden. But what are we all talking about today? We're talking about the Labour tax burden. Is it true? How did they come up with it? What we're not talking about is what is the equivalent sort of figure for the Conservatives. So on one hand, I can see why he really pushed this. He really pushed this, because now this is all what we're talking about. You know, but as you say, Phil, it was a bit of an own goal, because it could have been a non-story.
But the irony, perhaps not the irony, I don't want to use that word. Voters aren't stupid. They know how high the tax burden is now. Yeah. It's the highest since World War II, and it is projected to go up into the next Parliament. Whoever wins. Paul Johnson from the IFS told Newsnight at the beginning of the year, whoever wins, they're going to have to put up taxes.
There's a perfectly reasonable case for saying nobody's really telling you the truth about tax. I mean, if we were to have a neutral contest where the IFS conducting things, that's probably the conversation we'd be having. But this is the cut and thrust of an election campaign. Yeah. And so inevitably we get quality of information which is lower. But nevertheless, there is still something rather ridiculous about this gathering of all these numbers from far and wide into one pot and over 4 years, and say that's 2,000. And I think that there'll be a strong sense in the country too that we're in a bit of a mess. There's all sorts of things wrong with the country. Things are broken. And so the notion that there's not going to be the necessity for some sort of revenue raising in due course is probably completely and utterly baked into people's expectations.
But what? So why are no parties talking about that? Because it's not a vote winner. But again, I come back to the point, voters are not stupid.
Yeah, they're not stupid, but what voters want to see, and I think this is why Rishi Sunak kept saying, you know, we're talking about the future here, because he knows he could very well be easily attacked on his record. The Conservatives have been in power for 14 years, so, you know, they have a very long record to attack. And it was quite surprising, actually, that Keir Starmer didn't actually use the opportunity multiple times. Rishi Sunak was repeating this line, and it was almost bizarre. It was odd that he didn't sort of refer to the figures that he could have very easily referred to in attacking Rishi Sunak.
Yeah, well, I mean, he did. I mean, it wasn't true that he didn't respond. He did say, no, that's not true. He didn't say it as forcefully as perhaps his advisors probably would. Yes. No, if you watch it back, he does say it. And in fact, what happens, when it's referred to again, he rolls his eyes and he shakes his head and he acts as though, oh, come on. Now, I know that doesn't come across, and he probably should have gone in and said it's garbage right from the beginning, which is what he ended up saying. So maybe he could have gone in harder. But I mean, I think there's a very important reason why Labour isn't talking about tax rises, because the Labour Party is in a different position. The Labour Party always has to win the trust of the people against the assumption, the accusation it's going to be profligate. And it's not so long ago that the Labour Party was led by a leadership that was absolutely free with imaginary money that it was going to spend. And so I completely would endorse what Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves have done in keeping it tight.
Okay. We'll be back with you shortly. That row over tax emerged, as you know, in last night's TV debate. The next one, get ready for this, is a 7-way affair. 7 on Friday night. It's on BBC One. It's hosted by Michelle Hussein, and these are the 7 people taking part. Penny Mordaunt from the Tories, Angela Rayner from Labour, Stephen Flynn from the SNP, Reen ap Yoreth from Plaid Cymru, Nigel Farage from Reform, Carla Denny from the Greens, and Daisy Cooper from the Liberal Democrats. All on BBC One at 7:30, and we will, of course, have post-debate analysis here on Newsnight with Faisal at 10:30. Right now, we're going to talk to the Conservative peer, Lord Goldsmith. Zach Goldsmith, former climate minister who resigned, or environment minister who resigned from the government last year, accusing Rishi Sunak of being simply uninterested in the environment. And welcome to Newsnight. I wonder what you think, first of all, about the fact that thus far in this election campaign, the global climate has barely featured.
I mean, it's not that surprising. It's been such a busy time. There have been so many big things that have happened that have had a massive impact on people's lives. And if if you're living in an area which has a housing shortage and someone asks you what's your #1 concern, you're not going to say climate change or the Congo basin being destroyed. You're going to say you want more housing, or if your parents aren't well, you want a better NHS. So it's rare that the environment is cited as the most immediate concern, but logically, it is the biggest concern. We are, as we know, and I don't think there's any doubt about this, we are undermining, killing those ecological systems that literally make life possible. So logically, there can't be a bigger issue. And while it may not and probably won't feature much in this election, and there are all kinds of reasons for that, it matters that the next government feels pressure from people, one way or another, to deliver. Because if we have a government that behaves in the way the Conservative government has behaved in the last few months, which is really just a walk off the international stage, shows zero interest in what is the defining challenge of our age, then we're going to be in real trouble. Because the UK has a massively important role to play internationally. We've seen that in the last few years, where really big things have been agreed globally, almost entirely down to the hard work of some of our invisible but brilliant negotiators in DEFRA, in the Foreign Office, and I had the privilege of working with these people and seeing the impact of their work. So I'm very anxious that the next government feels pressure to up their game dramatically.
You say the UK has walked off the international stage. The government say we're the first major economy to halve greenhouse gas emissions since 1990. We've set into law one of the most ambitious 2035 climate change targets of any major economy, referring to the target to cut emissions from manufacturing by about 2/3 by 2035. Is that not enough?
It is true that the UK has a better record than I think it gets credit for, but that's very different to saying that this current iteration of the Conservative government has a good record. Under the current Prime Minister, there's been very little progress. But I'd step back a second if I can. I mean, the climate politics it is very two-dimensional. When people talk about the environment now, they always invariably end up talking about carbon emissions, energy transition. But climate change is just one symptom of many, and the problem is our relationship with the natural world. And it's infuriating, but it's also wrong that the environment, and this is something that's done by the broadcasters as well as politicians and commentators, is squeezed into this very two-dimensional box. And we don't talk about the things that really matter. If the Congo basin goes, and it's going at 1 million hectares a year, that's half the rainfall of the continent of Africa, which would no longer be there. It doesn't matter how many solar panels you put up, how many wind turbines you build. If we lose the Amazon, if we lose the Congo basin, if we allow Indonesia to continue to be destroyed, although we're seeing great things in that country at the moment, it's game over. And so this stuff really matters.
OK. And I take your point about the media as well. And you will hate this next question, but I'm going to ask it. You're no fan of Rishi Sunak. So how much is your criticism of him when it comes to the environment to do with the fact that you're much closer to Boris Johnson and you can't be doing with Mr Sunak?
Well, look, I care so much more about the issues than I do about personalities in politics. It's not about friendships at all. I remained a minister under Rishi Sunak because I wanted to get things done. I was a minister under Boris Johnson, not because he was a mate, but because I wanted to get things done. And I found that under Boris Johnson, and I think even his severest critics, when they look at his environment record, will acknowledge that we got more done in his time in office than any previous Prime Minister in this country.
But did you watch the debate last night?
And I found myself going from a period of being able to get so much done to really struggling to avoid walking backwards. And the straw that broke my back was that I was going to have to stand up in Parliament and say things which I knew were not true about our aid budget, about the amount of money we'd committed and were going to be spending on climate finance. We made a pledge which was largely responsible for helping us get the rest of the world to make significant financial pledge. We said we'd double our climate finance to 11.6 billion. And the government was very clear, internally at least, that we were not going to meet that target, and we were going to manipulate the figures to look like we were meeting that target, and I wasn't willing to go along with that.
If the polls are right, Labour will form the next government. Do you have confidence that they will do what you want to be done when it comes to the environment and nature?
I think on the two-dimensional component, energy transition, energy efficiency, etc., I think we'll see a lot of investment. I think that'll be good. I think we'll see jobs, and we'll see economic growth on the back of it. So I think that, even though we're not hearing much from Labour, I think they're pretty much committed to investing what's needed to turn the tide. On nature, I'm less convinced. I think there are champions in the Labour Party. I think David Lammy actually is hopefully going to be the next Foreign Secretary, and I think as Foreign Secretary he recognises, he understands the importance of nature in this debate, and I think he understands the importance of the UK within that issue. But I'm not convinced that there's a big team of people around him who share that view.
Right. Would you consider joining Labour in the Lords? I mean, you don't sound...
Look, I'm completely fed up.
Much of a Conservative.
I'm very much a Conservative. I've always been a Conservative. I just have very little time for the government as it is now. We've had 14 years, as you've just heard. I think we could have achieved a great deal more than we have. And I think on the issues that really matter,
do they deserve another 5 years, the Conservatives?
It's very hard to make the case for 5 more years for the Conservative Party. From my point of view, you call me a monomaniac possibly, but I care more than anything else about these issues that we're talking about now, and I don't see any leadership whatsoever from the top in the Conservative Party. We're not seeing much yet from the Labour Party, but there are people within the Labour Party who will be senior figures in the next government. I think we know it's going to be the next government unless something very weird happens, and I have more confidence in those people to deliver than I do with, I'm afraid, the current incumbent in number 10. But it's in all of our interests that they do, and I'm not a tribal politician. Whoever is in power, whoever runs this country for the next 5 years, I will be doing all I can, as many others will, to pressure them to prioritise these issues and to get it right. And I'll work with anyone.
You recently tweeted, "I understand the anger towards Sunak, who's damaged the party almost beyond repair." Some might argue that's Boris Johnson and Liz Truss. And you went on to say he has all but guaranteed the majority of his MPs will lose their job next month. I mean, do you genuinely believe that most Tory MPs will be voted out?
Look, it's looking pretty bleak. I mean, I have not been studying this election day to day, as you would have done, but it's hard to imagine much of the party remaining after election day. I mean, but who knows? Strange things happen in elections. There might be a sense, I think, by the way, regardless of where one stands politically, it's important that there is a decent opposition. So I hope it's not annihilated. I hope we do have a decent opposition. And it may be that voters worry about the Conservative Party being completely obliterated and correct their vote somewhat. That's the only thing I can imagine that might swing things back a little bit in favour of the Conservative Party. And I do hope that happens, because as I say, I think a giant majority is dangerous in the hands of any party.
Okay. Thank you very much for talking to our audience.
Thank you very much.
Lord Goldsmith. Nick, so, I mean, there will be conversations going on within the Tories about the future of the party, depending on what happens after the election.
And there will be conversations going on about a key ally of Boris Johnson, Zac Goldsmith, just telling you in the last few minutes that it's hard to imagine much of the Conservative Party remaining in Parliament after this election. There have been conversations off stage about what's called a Canada-style meltdown, where it's even bigger than your normal sort of landslide, your 1945, your 1997 landslide, much more than that. And you've had Zac Goldsmith talking about a bleak picture for his party.
Obviously, Mercy used to work for Kemi Badenoch. She, no doubt, will be knocking on doors, fighting for every single vote for the Conservatives. But there are people like her, like Penny Mordaunt and many others, who would be forgiven for looking post-election and thinking, what are their chances, if they keep their own seats, of being the next leader?
Yes, that will inevitably be the case, and I'm sure that has been the case for a while. I don't think anybody's under any impression that Rishi Sunak intends to remain a backbench MP if he loses for a significant amount of time. And I think the real question for whoever does go on to lead the Conservative Party after Rishi Sunak is it's an existential question, really, for the Conservatives. And it's a question about the identity of the party, because I think a lot of people really have lost faith in the Conservative to actually have any principles and stand for anything and have Conservative values. And I think the reason Kemi Badenoch, who I worked for, has been particularly popular is because she's one of the more robust figures when it comes to having principles and...
Exactly what you do.
Why are you saying that? You're shaking your head in disagreement.
I think you're on the edge of a complete catastrophe. I think the Conservative Party had a glimmer this week of a total and utter meltdown of the kind we haven't seen before. A basic proposition of British politics has reasserted itself. In 2019, the left took hold of the Labour Party and they led it to catastrophe. Now the right has taken hold of the Tory Party and they want to compete for a small amount of the electorate, for 35% of the electorate,
of the right
with reform. And there just aren't enough people to win. You just have to learn to count. And the Tory party at the moment only needs to be able to count up to 19, because that's where they are in the opinion polls.
Right.
And if you lead it from that side, you cannot win.
There's one poll out tonight. Again, it is one poll. The only poll that counts is on July the 4th. But what does it show in terms of reform and where they are in with the Conservatives?
Thanks, Vic. You got the caveats out of the way for me.
Yep.
So it's a YouGov Sky poll, and it's basically saying that the Conservative Party on this one is just 2 points ahead of Reform UK. Conservatives on 19%, Reform UK on 17%. YouGov have changed their methodology. Had they used their old methodology, they would have been tied on 18%. Now, Reform UK had hoped that if Nigel Farage said, I'm going to lead and I'm going to stand, it would make a difference. Well, it appears to be so far in one poll doing that. Talking to Conservatives, they are nervous. But one I was speaking to in a seat where Reform are a threat say, if we say on the doorstep, if you vote for Nigel Farage, you get Keir Starmer, they say that message is being heard. And interestingly, they're saying they're just noticing what they described as the mighty machine of Conservative campaign headquarters sending out mail shots that candidates don't know about in the seats. Mail shots in targeted seats, basically saying, vote Farage, get Starmer.
Right. If Nigel Farage wins, even if he doesn't, what pressure will he put not just on the Conservatives, but on a Labour government if that happens, if the polls are right?
Do you know, I think not much. I mean, I think firstly, the Reform vote doesn't eat into the Labour vote anymore. It doesn't look like it, because the Labour vote is overwhelmingly a Remain and a disillusioned Brexiteer vote. So I don't think Farage has much of a danger to Labour before the election. And I think if there's a majority of 200 and a lone Nigel Farage, who for the first time in his life has got a job to do, I just don't see him. I think we're on the edge of him being an irrelevance. The politics are going to change so fundamentally if that happens, that I don't think that the 24 hours live at the Farage rolling news
It's interesting. I spoke to a former Labour cabinet minister and they were saying the precise opposite.
Well,
they were saying that they're worried that if Nigel Farage does well, if he's in Parliament, that will inevitably take the Conservative, pull them in that direction to the right.
Good.
And that the Labour Party would find that difficult on the specific issues of immigration and our relationship with Europe. They would not be able to do perhaps what they want to do.
I think that's nonsense, because I think that would mean complete irrelevance for the Conservative Party. The Tory Party would just not be in the game then. A Labour Party with a 200-seat majority, with a Tory Party which was not a viable candidate for power, is absolutely happy days for the Labour Party. I don't know who you're talking to, Nick, but you need better informant.
OK, all right. Let's talk about the Lib Dems, because the leader of the Lib Dems has today said sorry for speeding on the M1. He got 3 points on his licence, and he has spoken again about his experience as a carer for his severely disabled son, John, having previously also cared for his own mum, who died when Sir Ed Davey was just 15.
One of my biggest fears in life, I'll make this confession, is what happens to him when I'm gone. And I reflect on what my mother thought, leaving your children early. And I remember I'd been on a school trip to Germany when she was ill. And I took a picture of me and this German girl, and she saw the picture of me and this girl. she said to me, I wonder who you're going to end up with. And I worry about who's going to look after him, and no one's going to love him and hold him like I and my wife hold him.
Let's talk to the Lib Dems, Sarah Olney, who is their Treasury spokesperson, one of them. Thank you very much for being with us. First of all, when you see your leader speaking in these terms, how does it affect you?
It's quite a hard watch, actually. I obviously know Ed very well. We've worked together in Parliament for the last 4.5 years. I know him as someone who's so energetic, who's really positive, really resilient. And, you know, to see him talking like that, it's actually quite difficult because, you know, it really shows, you know, some of the difficulties that had to overcome in his life, both in his as a child and also we've had a party political broadcast this evening where he talks about his life with his son who has, you know, quite severe additional needs.
And it's one of the reasons why in this election the Lib Dems are promising to make personal care for the elderly and disabled free, similar to the system that operates in Scotland. Plus you want to raise care workers' pay. And you say this would be funded by reversing tax cuts given to big banks, covering the cost, which would be about 2.7 billion. Except independent experts say it's going to be way more than that. Way more.
So, I mean, we are, I think, the only party that's really coming forward with a serious plan for social care, and you can see that it's very much, you know, informed by Ed's own experience. He wants to stand up for carers. He wants to make a difference for carers.
We understand that.
5.5 million carers. So, I mean, we'll be bringing forward our manifesto, obviously in due course. It'll be a fully costed manifesto.
But are you saying it's going to be? You're going to have more than 2.7 billion? Because let me tell you that the King's Fund are saying the true cost of reform will be much more than the Lib Dems have stated.
So what we are talking about is that we've really got to make a change here in social care. It starts with paying the people who are working in social care a proper salary. We need to be recruiting so many more people into social care in order to be able to deliver the levels of care, the quality of care that people really deserve. So, you know, we want to make a start on that. We want to really, you know, look at the social care system.
So, just so I'm clear, are you saying the 2.7 billion then is like a down payment and there's going to be more to come, or are you just not answering my question?
Well, what we're saying is, you know, we need to give confidence to people that in their old age
they're going to be... But you need money to give confidence to people.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm saying we will be bringing forward our manifesto in due course. It'll be fully costed. But, I mean, this is the point that we've really got to focus on. But, I mean, I just want to say that the other point about social care is if we can fix some of these problems, we can do so much better in the NHS. Because, we speak to hospital managers time and time again, and one of their biggest problems is not being able to discharge patients because they can't find the right social care package for them. So if we can make a real difference to the way social care is delivered and funded in this country, we can make a real difference to the NHS, we can make a real difference to so many more lives.
Do the Lib Dems still want to overturn Brexit?
We've been very clear about this. You know, there's no doubt we have been the most pro-European party on this issue. You know, since before the referendum, we opposed Brexit at every stage. And now that we have left the European Union, we need to be pragmatic about what happens next. We need to start with, you know, building those relationships, getting back the trust that has been lost, that has been damaged between us and our European partners. We want to look at some of those side agreements. We want to look at a veterinary agreement. We want to look at a youth mobility scheme, mutual recognition of professional qualifications.
I go back to you. I think we can show this actually to our audience. The 2019 Lib Dem manifesto. Hopefully we've got that somewhere. I mean, it was very clear. Obviously, we'd left. We were about to leave. The vote had happened several years before. Stop Brexit. Do you still want to stop Brexit?
Back in 2019, there was still an opportunity to stop Brexit via democratic means.
So now you don't want to stop Brexit anymore?
So what we're saying now is that we're in a different place.
You don't want to overturn it?
We need to move back towards a closer relationship with Europe. Okay. I was just saying to you, we've got a four-step process, and I was just talking you through those steps, and ultimately...
Please don't talk me through the four of them.
Okay.
I just want to be clear, and you can say yes or no if you like. Do the Lib Dems want to still overturn Brexit, yes or no?
No, what we're talking about is is rebuilding the relationship.
Sure.
We can't go back to where we were.
Okay.
We need to start from where we are now, and we need to move forward. And we definitely want to move forward to a closer relationship with Europe. And just to say, ultimately, our ultimate goal is to rejoin the single market.
Ah, okay. Because you will have seen that YouGov poll in January, where 51% of people said they would support rejoining the EU, and your supporters would like you to be shouting that from the rooftops right now.
We have to be pragmatic about what's possible. The Conservative government have completely, they've done so much damage to our relationship with Europe. It's not as simple as just saying we can immediately step back into the relationship that we had before. We need to start with rebuilding the trust that's been so badly damaged.
Do you think the UK will rejoin the EU in your lifetime?
I find that very difficult to say. As I say, we have set out a roadmap for what we think is possible from where we are, but it's going to take time. We can't do it overnight.
Okay. Thank you very much, Sarah Olney. Thank you for being with us from the Liberal Democrats. Right, let's have a look at some of the stories on tomorrow's front pages. So we've got the Financial Times. Starmer accuses Sunak of resorting to... Bear with me while I read it off our big screen. Resorting to lies over Labour's £2,000 tax rise claim. Daily Express, eternally in their debt. And we will be commemorating the anniversary of D-Day in just a second. The Eye, at last a real plan to save Britain's rivers. Then down there we've got the Daily Telegraph. Hunt issues challenge to Starmer over taxes on property. The Guardian, Sunak lied to the country over Labour tax and spend plans, says Starmer. And we've got the King on the front page of The Guardian meeting some of the D-Day veterans. And then the Daily Mirror, a very moving front page. D-Day, 80 years. To those who served and to those who died, thank you. That is all from us. We are going to end the programme by commemorating the 80th anniversary tomorrow of the Normandy landings that began the liberation of France in the Second World War. So we leave you with stills of that day, enhanced by the artist Marina Amaral, and with the poem The Longest Day, read by Royal Engineer Commando Harry Billinge. Unlike many of his friends, Harry survived D-Day. He died 2 years ago at the age of 96. Good night.
Do not call me hero when you see the medals that I wear. Medals maketh not the hero, they just prove that I was there. Do not call me hero now that I am old and grey. I left a lad, returned a man, they stole my youth that day. Do not call me hero when they ran the wall of hell, the blood, the fears, and cries the tears, we left them where they fell. Do not call me hero, each night I stop and pray, for all the friends I knew and lost, I survived my longest day. Do not call me hero in the years that pass, for all the real true heroes have crosses lined upon the grass.